originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome again to the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Maloney. I am very, very excited about today's guest. Someone who I've gotten to know over the last several years. Met him through a retreat that we went on together, and just an incredible human being, an incredible journey that he's going to share with us today, and story about his organization, and an incredible leader. Before I introduce our guest, I thought I'd start with this quote that I thought was really fitting for a life of serving others, which is exactly what you have done your entire life. And the quote is from Mother Teresa: "A life not lived for others is not a life at all." Welcome to my guest, Justin Miller.
Matt, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Justin is the CEO of Untold, Inc. Untold is the new brand, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, right? It was previously Care for AIDS.
Right.
And you guys went through a full rebranding, which is pretty exciting. So I'd like to, why don't we just start off with, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about Untold, Inc.? Tell them about the journey from moving from what was Care for AIDS to Untold, and then just talk about your mission, vision, and how you really keep that front and center.
Yes. Well, first of all, give me some grace today because we are still new in this brand. And so
Understood.
As I talk about it, if I say Care for AIDS, give me a pass.
Okay.
But we love this new brand, and it has such deep meaning, not just for the people that we serve in East Africa, but it's an invitation for all of us to live boldly into the untold stories that are ahead of us, and examining the things in our life that may be untold stories in the past that might be preventing us from being able to live into the untold stories of our future.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of our ministry is we're a counseling organization. So a lot of it is meeting our clients where they are and realizing that there is a lot of stigma and shame that has caused them to believe lies about who they are, their value, their worth. We're inviting them to find that truth about who they are, who God says they are, so they can live into this future. To your question, what is our mission? Our mission is to embrace and equip people to live a life beyond AIDS. So life beyond AIDS is not just a physical life, but it is every aspect of the whole person. We want them to flourish in their life. And our vision is that we believe in a world where no story is cut short or silenced by AIDS. And the reality of it is that's still happening every single day, even though in our current context here in the U.S., we may not be aware of that happening.
Sure.
But there are still upwards of 1 million deaths a year globally from HIV and AIDS.
It's incredible.
And even bigger number than that is the number of people who are not living into those untold stories because
they're marginalized because
their
of it,
voice has been silenced.
Yeah.
And so how do we find a way to call that voice back out? Because we believe they have something to say and some value to add to the community.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when you started, and I want you to talk about that, like, how did this organization come to be, right? And what was your journey just before starting the organization? Was there, because I think it's important for the audience, particularly those that are looking to step out and step up as leaders and maybe do something different with their life, hearing from leaders like yourself that said, this was my journey into starting this organization. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was some inspiration from Bono, right, of U2, who'd kind of had this charge to the church about stepping up for AIDS and the AIDS crisis across the globe, going back a couple of decades now, I think, or so. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I was 18 years old. I was sitting in an auditorium of 8,000 leaders in South Barrington, Illinois. I was in a room, in a space that really, as a college freshman, I had no business being in. And at that time, Bono was giving a challenge to really the American church to say, we have rallied support from all areas of our...
Wait, were you in the room with Bono?
So I was in the room live at the event, but he had actually pre-recorded the interview.
Okay, I got you. But still, I mean, you were in this room, like,
right.
And he's speaking to these leaders of the church and different people in the community and saying, "This is the charge." And that's intense.
To be fair, they had cut the interview with clips from his concerts. In the interview, so that added to the intensity of that moment.
Of course, it did. That's cool.
U2 sing, and his charge was, the church is absent. The church is nowhere to be found because they're afraid to wade into this issue that they feel like is a moral hazard. And he said that, in my reading of the scriptures, that's unacceptable. That this is a group of people that Jesus would spend time with. That the church is called to love and to serve. And so what is going to be the church's legacy as we look back and tell our kids, and they ask the question, where was the church?
Yeah, and we failed this major global situation, epidemic, I guess, if you will, right, at the time.
And at the time, I was completely unaware about the AIDS pandemic, completely ignorant to even probably what HIV was. So that just led me on a journey of discovery of what's going on, who are the actors involved that are actually trying to organize the American church to make a response to this. And the truth was, as we begin examining that, looking into that, there really wasn't at least a clear singular voice saying, hey, let's call the American church into this fight. So that's what led me to say, well, if I'm going to speak with any confidence on this matter, I've got to actually go and experience it for myself. So over the next
big
9
moment.
months,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's this is what's beautiful about, God and how he uses certain things. He used this day, this event, you're sitting there and he lights a fire in your heart. And then out of that and we're about to hear, but over the next, months or years, you then start this organization that has a global impact. I mean, really, ultimately it's going to have, or does have, a global impact. I just love that. I love it. So continue.
Well, it's a long story that's unfolded over the last 15 years, but ended up on the ground in Kenya 15 years ago, more or less right now. It's been 15 years since I stepped foot in Kenya for the first time, and my whole life changed. I met these 2 Kenyan pastors who God had already called into this ministry of serving those with HIV and AIDS. And over the course of a month there in country where I was just being assaulted with all of the stories and the experiences of people living with HIV and AIDS, I realized there's an opportunity here, and there's a need that somebody needs to step into. And I believe that it was the local church was the one that needed to step up and help those in their community that were suffering. And God,
how long were you over there? Just curious, on your first trip?
About 3.5 weeks.
Okay.
3.5 weeks.
Wow. So you really, you stayed a while.
We did. And we were 19. We were just kids. The hope was to produce a documentary that would inspire action from the American church. We ended up producing a short little trailer, but at the end of the day, that trip was more of just a launching pad for us to found what was Care for AIDS for a long time. And so I think what I would want people to hear from this story, though, is that it is a big step to get on a plane to go to Kenya, but this whole story is just, it's been a journey of small steps. It's not, there's been like a moment or a gesture. It's just, I'm going to try to understand this issue from a deeper perspective. I'm going to reach out to some organizations in Kenya and see if anybody wants to host me when I come. I'm going to ask some friends and family if they would support me as I go on this trip. Going to Kenya, and just we continue to take these steps. When I decided first to partner with Cornell and Duncan to launch this organization, they needed $200 a month. That was the entirety of the ministry budget.
That was their need, $200 a month
to start. And I said, okay, I can do that. And so I really resonate with the idea that the Christian life and all of our lives is a long obedience in the same direction. And that's what I have tried to practice in this over 15 years. We've experienced, thankfully, very steady, consistent growth over time. But it hasn't been because of a single action or a single moment that catapulted us there. it was just that faithful obedience in the same direction.
Yeah. Talk to the audience a little bit about, talk to me about a little bit about just during all of this, you obviously needed to surround yourself with wise counsel, people to speak into you. I mean, you were 19 and then 20 and then 21. I mean, geez, you were doing some amazing things at 19. I have to admit, I was not that mature at 19. It was more like 28 for me. But in all seriousness, talk about just the value and maybe just a little snippet of some of the people, and you don't have to mention names, but just some of the people and leaders that were speaking into you and maybe some advice and things that you got as you walk through some of this.
You know, I've been grateful in my life to be surrounded by just a host of great counselors, and first and foremost, my dad. And we may talk more about that on the family side of my journey. But my dad, for the last 20 years, has been tasked with the responsibility of figuring out how, what is Chick-fil-A's point of view on leadership, and how do we share that with the world? And it's been amazing to have him as one of my biggest cheerleaders and somebody that can guide me along this path. And even beyond him, I've had countless board members over the past 15 years who've stood with me, who've been providing counsel to me. Even today, I want to have a leader or leaders that are 5-10 years ahead of where I am.
Of course.
That are speaking into me.
Absolutely. We need people to speak into us. We need wise counsel constantly, because we, just like every other human being, we're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to trip up. And frankly, we don't always have the answers. In fact, I would say that I probably rarely have the answer, right? Every once in a while, I might get lucky and say, I think I know the answer to that. Usually it's like, okay, let me go back and process, let me think. And so that's incredible. And I think that that's important for the audience to understand, is that whatever your vocation is, whatever you are, there's a yearning for you to do, surround yourself with wise counsel, right? Find those people and use them as sounding boards. And don't be afraid as a leader to say, I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to do this. So
one of the exemplars of this that I would love to share his name, because I think they're doing an amazing job, is Peter Greer. I don't know if you know Peter Greer and Hope International, but he's been a dear friend and mentor in this journey. And I would say that apart from having the Word of God influence how we build our organization, I would say their organization has probably shaped the most of how I think about leadership, how I think about living out of an abundance mindset, not a scarcity one.
Yes, right.
How do we realize that we are in this work to build the kingdom of God, not to build the untold kingdom? How do we stay mission true and not drift into things that we shouldn't, which is one of the biggest risks that organizations in our space face.
Oh yeah. I think any organization, right? That drift of like that shiny object. Ooh, let's go do that. Let's go.
Exactly.
I'm one of the world's worst at that, because I get attracted. I say, I think we can do that. And sometimes it's played out well, and sometimes it's worked against us.
Yeah. So I could spend a whole time talking about what I've learned through that relationship, but that's been one of the nonprofit mentors that I've really just been blessed by. And even the idea that, growth for an organization like ours is a really good outcome, but it's a really bad goal. And I've really continued to be reminded that, hey, when you chase growth as your goal, right, in our space, you end up cutting corners and doing things that actually really hurt the people you're trying to serve. But if you're doing the right things that you need to do, you're caring for your clients, you're caring for your staff, growth is the natural outcome from that. But,
so then what is your aim? If it's not growth, which I know that it's not, what is the aim for your organization?
Yeah, I would say the two things that are true north for us is the impact for our clients.
Yep, I knew that. You were going to say that. Yep.
Which, evaluating human flourishing is not an easy target to try to understand, but it is something that we really try to understand. Are we having the desired impact for the people that we're serving? And then the other one is the health and well-being of our staff and our employees. That's not just a means to an end of helping serve our clients better. That's actually an end in and of itself, is that we have an organization that's full of healthy, flourishing people. Yeah. So we look at those two things and say, you know what, if we're really pushing on growth, or we are growing a lot, and either of those things start to falter, maybe we need to refocus and reevaluate how fast we're growing as an organization, because those two things can't be compromised.
Yeah, well said. What are you doing to, and I think this is important for the audience to hear, what are you doing to invest in the health and wellness of your staff? What does that look like inside of Untold?
One of our core principles that we abide by as an organization is that we pursue flourishing for all. And I think
that's great.
Keeping that front and center, reminding ourselves that that is just as relevant to our clients we're serving as well as our employees in our organization, and knowing that we are, even our clients, we didn't really talk about what our program looks like. But
we're going to get into that.
We might, but at the end of the day, our program focuses on a client as an integrated person, as we all are. We are not just a body, we're not just a soul, we're not just a worker. All of aspects of our lives are integrated. And so we value that same thing for our employees, and letting them know that we care about their health and well-being. We can't promote this to our clients if we aren't willing to practice it with the people that we work with. And so just having a culture that's just built on trust, in the sense that people are so bought in to our work that we give people a lot of flexibility in our workplace to take care of what's important at home and at work. It's not like you have to punch in a certain time. We invest a lot in both individual and collective formation as an organization. We're constantly, as individuals, we're being formed by the things that are in our world. And so what is each of our team members doing to pursue that in their own life? And then what are we as a team studying that's going to continue to shape how we see the world? And that's, we can have a much longer conversation about what that looks like. But in East Africa, we've got 250 staff. And so it's honestly something that we're playing catch up on a little bit, because as we've grown so quickly, making sure that in a place where they don't have, the abundance of resources that we do here for this kind of work and development and formation, we developed more digital platforms where they can access tools and resources to continue to grow. And what are we doing to care for them well? Well,
every organization, I think, struggles with as they scale. You're doing all the right things, but it gets tough.
It's harder. And I was reflecting the other day with someone about this idea that if our organization, which it has historically grown anywhere from 15 to 30% year over year, the last 15 years. Wow. Theoretically, we don't measure this, but theoretically, my leaders who are in the organization would need to match that growth in order to, I mean, if that's the growth of the complexity and the size, and leaders need to kind of match that pace, but to think about trying to help people grow at 15 to 30%. So as we grow, figuring out how do we make sure that we're not outgrowing the capacity and the talent that we have on our team.
Yeah. Let's dig a little deeper. Let me peel the onion back a little bit more just on the organization, and just let's take a glimpse inside of what's going on on the ground floor over in Kenya and elsewhere. What are the things that you're focused on next to try to drive those steps, those consistent steps to try to drive the organization in a forward moving direction as we come out of these last couple of years here?
Yeah. I would say the challenges that we face here in the U.S. are a little bit unique to what they're facing in East Africa.
Sure.
So those look a little bit different.
Okay.
Here, this season has not really had a tremendous negative impact on the world of philanthropy and giving. Donors have been pretty generous during this season. And so we're grateful that that's not been an issue. We've felt the pressure, as a lot of people have, I'm sure, of just the talent piece. We're a relatively small team. There's only 9 of us in the States, but I'd like to be at 12. So that's not a foreign concept to people right now.
No. It's a struggle that everybody is having.
So I think as I'm looking at that, as I know that I'm trying to build the team, not for where we are today, but where we want to be in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So if we're constantly playing catch up on hiring the right people and growing the team, that's just going to make it harder for us to continue to grow as we have in the past. And then I look at East Africa, and obviously there's no shortage of need that we can meet. We're in 90 communities today, and I hope over the next 3 years we can be in 150.
90, right?
90.
Wow.
Not the same challenges with people there. There's no shortage of people that want to do this kind of work. Going back to what we said earlier, I think the biggest challenge that I think about, and I try to support our African team, is how do we make sure that we've got a very deep leadership bench?
Sure.
The way we think about learning and development is not a cultural norm there. And so they're voracious learners. They want to learn. They're used to learning in a different context. And it's more, going back and getting an additional degree.
Yeah. Okay.
Not necessarily kind of the ongoing development that we want to see from our people. So I think that's something.
So that's been a cultural challenge, it sounds like, right? In
leading
the growth of
culturally is so, it's, looking at how we view things here in the US and how they view things here in Kenya, and also not assuming, which we have the habit of doing as Americans, that we also have the right answer. Because projecting that onto a culture that's not my own. We talk about cultural congruence, letting the people that are closest to that culture determine what's appropriate in
cultural congruence. That's great. That makes a lot of sense.
And I'm not very congruent to the Kenyan culture as an affluent white American.
Sure.
But I think we do try to work together closely with our leadership team there to say, hey, we can take the best ideas and practices and bring those into our East African organization. So I think we're trying to rethink how we do leadership development. How are we identifying and investing in emerging leaders in our organization to make sure that as we open 60 more communities and hopefully take our program outside of East Africa and move it into South Africa, how do we make sure that we've got enough leaders on the bench who can help to run that growing organization?
Talk to the audience a little bit about first of all, what drove you to change the identity of the organization, right? This kind of, we're rebranding it, what led to that decision, and what do you hope is to come from that decision, as you looked at the next 3 to 5 years?
Frankly, people just didn't really like the name. And more so on the African side, to say, hey, we're trying to combat it, but there's still a stigma around this.
Okay.
So I'm not able to talk about this.
That social stigma was so strong in East Africa and in the communities that you were serving, those 90 communities, that the word just AIDS being in the name, Care for AIDS, was perhaps a deterrent.
A barrier, And
barrier.
Our staff wouldn't wear it on their shirts in the community for fear of outing one of our clients. Our clients, thankfully our clients don't often have to say the name of the organization because we actually brand each of our centers. We allow the church partner that we work with to brand the center in the way they want to.
Which is your business model, right? You deploy the program within the local church, and let the church deploy within the local community. Yeah.
And we have this, it's still our staff that are in that church and in that community, but they select a name that fits them. So it's kind of an aside, but the reality of it is our staff and our clients didn't feel like it was a name that they felt bought into.
Yeah.
And when we got into it, which is still a sad reality that we're facing today, is that a lot of our donors didn't even want to socialize the name because they didn't want to be associated with AIDS.
Interesting.
Because there's still that stigma here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
And we could go down this road, and there's a lot more layers to this. But at the end of the day, too, when we talk about identity, saying that we care for AIDS is not true. We care for people.
Yeah.
And by assigning AIDS as an identifier for our clients, it almost suggests that that's their primary identity. Right. Which is not.
And that's not what you were aiming to do.
At all. No, we have a view of our clients that they are image bearers. Yeah. That they are valued because they are made in the image of God, and AIDS is part of their story, but it's not their primary story. So we wanted to kind of distance ourselves from that. And Untold has so much meaning to us. It's the untold stories.
I love it.
We talked about, and it's also, as you guys know, the word untold also means immeasurable. Yeah. Too many to count. Yeah. And that's the way that we see our clients.
I'd like to quote you, and you started going into this, but when we were on a call before the podcast, and what I captured on the phone call with him, and he said, look, there was no one decision, no one action, no one break to cause us to have success, not some big break or action. It was saying yes to a lot of steps along the journey, slow trudging pushes, on the flywheel over an extended period of time, long, and you just mentioned this, long obedience, you use the word obedience, but long obedience in the same direction. And that's so good.
Well, I can't take credit for it. It's been said before, but I think.
Well, that's and so I hadn't heard, I've heard the concepts in little parts, but as you said it on the phone, I thought it was phenomenal, and it really encapsulates the picture of what it means to, in just our lives. There's not one big moment. This is a journey, and we have to sit back and we have to enjoy it, but we have to make sure that we're moving constantly in a forward moving direction, and we have obedience, and it's long obedience, right?
A mentor of mine, he calls it the mundane middle. And he says that in life, we love starting things.
Right.
And even sometimes endings are great. There's always a celebration there, but the majority of our life is lived and our legacy is built in the mundane middle. Yeah. And 15 years of this work, I can tell you there's a lot of days that aren't, there's nothing glorious about them.
You're right.
They're hard, and it is really sometimes heavy work, but that's where we build our legacy.
They're hard, they're heavy, but they're worth it.
Yeah, they are. I think this may be a point of view that you've heard before on this podcast, but I would say it's probably pretty counter to the cultural moment that we're in terms of leadership. But I really believe that leadership in its purest and best form is actually a downward movement. It is a leadership that's rooted in sacrifice, in creating spaces for other people to experience the opportunity to lead, for them to experience flourishing. Yeah. And we've seen it in the life of Jesus. I think you've even talked about it with other guests before, but I think that is at its core, the reality of it is that anytime leadership is used to advance one's own agenda or to accrue power to somebody, that's a distorted leadership that I think,
without a doubt,
and I think the true call for me is to redemptive leadership. And redemption always requires that kind of sacrifice. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, that's what is probably lacking most in the world today.
Justin, thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody in podcast land, thank you so much for joining us today. Pick us up on the next episode to hear more about Justin's life, some of his leadership principles, and some things that he subscribes to. Until next time, enjoy your journey. I hope that your day today affords you opportunity to lift others up as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everybody.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Roland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Roland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.